Before there was a nation called the United States, there was only an idea that freedom could cross an ocean. 13 scattered colonies, carved from wilderness and hope, would one day speak as one voice. But first, there was struggle, survival, and faith. They came for land, for faith, for second chances. In 1607, the first English settlers reached Virginia, naming their fragile outpost Jamestown. A century later, thousands more crossed the Atlantic seeking what Europe could not give them: liberty of conscience and a life built by their own hands. Yet the New World was never empty. Native nations, Powhatan, Cherokee, Iroquois, had walked these forests for centuries. Trade, conflict, and uneasy truces bound settlers and natives together in a new, complicated world. The colonies grew separately. New England's Puritans, guided by scripture, the South by tobacco and plantation wealth. No one imagined a single country. They were Virginians, or New Yorkers, or Pennsylvanians, not yet Americans. Still, a common thread ran through them: a fierce sense of independence. The distance from London made self-government a habit. Town meetings, colonial assemblies. These were small experiments in democracy long before any declaration was written. By the mid-18th century, Britain ruled an empire stretching around the globe. To London, the colonies were loyal subjects. To the colonists, they were loyal, but free. Then came the taxes, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, the Townshend duties, laws written by men 3,000 miles away. When the British closed Boston Harbor after the Tea Party of 1773, a fire caught. 13 colonies, divided by trade, religion, and climate, began to talk of unity. In Philadelphia, delegates gathered for the First Continental Congress. They did not plan rebellion, only justice. But history, once in motion, rarely stops where it begins. On April 19, 1775, British soldiers met colonial militia at Lexington and Concord. A musket cracked. The shot heard round the world. The revolution had begun. In that summer of 1776, while war already burned, 56 men signed words that changed the world. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Thomas Jefferson's lines were not just a protest, they were a promise. Quote, John Adams, "Posterity, you will never know how much it costs the present generation to preserve your freedom. For 8 long years, freedom hung by a thread. George Washington's army froze at Valley Forge. Farmers left fields to fight. Families hid from redcoats. Yet against the world's greatest empire, an untrained army endured. In 1781, with French help, Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris recognized a new nation. 13 colonies were now the United States of America, independent but uncertain of what that meant. Freedom had been won, but order had not. The first system, the Articles of Confederation, bound the states loosely, with almost no central power. Debt rose, armies went unpaid, and rebellions flared. If liberty was to live, it needed structure. So, in 1787, delegates gathered again in Philadelphia to write a new foundation. Behind closed doors, they argued fiercely: big states against small, free states against slave states, ideals against fears. What emerged was compromise and genius. The Constitution of the United States created a government not of kings or parliaments, but of checks and balances. 3 branches: legislative, executive, judicial, each limited by the others. power divided, yet united. Quote, James Madison, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." In 1789, George Washington took the oath as the first president. He set the tone of humility and restraint. He refused a crown, served 2 terms, and walked away. In that act, he defined what freedom looks like, not grasped, but given back. The young republic learned to govern itself through trial and tension. Political factions grew. Federalists who trusted strong government and Democratic Republicans who feared it. Washington warned, "The spirit of party is our worst enemy." But democracy always carries argument in its bloodstream. Jefferson's election in 1800 proved that power could change hands peacefully, a miracle in that age. The country doubled overnight with the Louisiana Purchase. Lewis and Clark crossed a continent no map yet contained, and yet, while the frontier opened, another line deepened, between free and slave. The Constitution's compromise on slavery was a wound unhealed. Each new state's admission raised the same question: would it be free or slave? The Industrial Revolution transformed America. Cities rose. Machines replaced muscle. Immigrants poured through eastern ports. Opportunity glittered, and inequality grew. In 1823, President Monroe declared the Monroe Doctrine that the Western Hemisphere was off limits to European empires. A bold claim for a young nation, but it signaled a destiny. America would lead in its own hemisphere. Still, beneath prosperity, conscience stirred. Abolitionists spoke in churches and streets. The Underground Railroad whispered freedom through the night. The nation's moral question could no longer be delayed. Quote, Frederick Douglass, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." Congress tried compromise after compromise, but none held. The Fugitive Slave Act, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the violence of Bleeding Kansas, each deepened the divide. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision declared that Black Americans could never be citizens. The promise of equality rang hollow. Then, in 1860, a tall lawyer from Illinois won the presidency on a platform of stopping slavery's spread. His name was Abraham Lincoln. Southern states saw his election as a threat to their way of life. One by one, they seceded. In April 1861, Confederate guns fired on Fort Sumter. The Union cracked. The Civil War, the nation's trial by fire, had begun. No war before or since would cost so many American lives. Brother fought brother. Towns burned. Families prayed for sons who would never return. Lincoln called it a fiery trial. In 1863, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate territory free. The war became not only for Union, but for human liberty itself. At Gettysburg, standing among the graves, Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes that outlived all speeches. Quote, Abraham Lincoln, 1863, "That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." 2 years later, the guns fell silent. The Union was saved, but at an unbearable cost. More than 600,000 dead, and one president assassinated. On April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln fell to an assassin's bullet. But his dream, that a free people could govern themselves and survive their own divisions, did not die. The first century of America ended in blood and rebirth. Out of revolution and civil war, a single truth endured: That freedom is not a gift once won, but a covenant renewed in every generation. And so the United States entered its next chapter, a nation tested, wounded, yet alive. Its government would stretch, struggle, and rise again, always chasing the meaning of those words written in 1776, "All men are created equal."